And today I want to talk about something we almost never name out loud, not because it isn't important, but because most of us were never taught how. So that's the voicing, right? That's the things that we never say. And that is what we do when we don't know how to say what how we feel. So first we're going to talk about what those reactions are. If you come to BMO events, you heard me talk about reactions, capital R, capital E actions. As in those are the things that you're repeating. And if you have ever followed a therapist or a behavior scientist or worked with a therapist, they talk all about catching the repetitions, right? So reactions is the number one way to catch the way that you're repeating yourself. It's the actions you're doing over and over again, those things that you want to let go. So today we're going to talk about the things that we do that maybe we're not taking note of when we don't practice learning how to express feelings and needs, the things that we do as reactions that maybe up until now you didn't actually see as reactions. So, I'm going to share part of the things that I've unearthed from my own healing journey and notice as hindsight becomes insight. And hopefully that will help release you a little bit here. Because when we don't have language, but we still have emotion, we still have need, we still have reaction, often in place of the true connection and interaction. So, reaction versus interaction. I talk a lot about that in BMO events. I talk about the difference between the two. Reactions are based on limitations, limiting beliefs, and what I call need to behavior, whereas interactions are based on connection. Connection is at the core, the center of need for behavior. Connection is literally what the center of the BMO needs wheel comprises of. Like if there was a wheel in the center of the wheel that just expressed all of it, it would be connection. Connection is being seen, being heard, being known. Those are the things we're often reacting to. Like, how often do you react because you're like, you're not hearing me? You're not seeing me. This is just listen, right? Those are those moments. But we're robbing connection when we have reactions. We really want to focus on how to move from reaction to interaction. But first, we have to notice what we're doing. So that's what today is all about. So we don't want to rob ourselves from the interactions we want with the people we love. Friends, family, and romantic partners. So I know it's the whole season of Valentine's, but this isn't just about your significant other. This is about any relationship. This is about the relationship that you have with coworkers or what's happening between you and a boss, you know? It's it's all types of relationships have these foundations, these things that happen, these needs, these interactions or reactions, right? When we don't have words, we use behavior. If you grew up in an environment where feelings were dismissed or minimized or punished or ignored or maybe even competed with, you were not taught how to express them. You were taught how to cope with them or hide them or minimize them in your own way, right? Coping without language often turns into reactions. For me, that reaction used to look like this. If I felt unseen, unheard, or misunderstood, I didn't slow down and explain myself. I got sharper. I sped up. I got louder and more cutting, more precise in the way that I heard people. And that was one of those things that would, I'd fold over in shame. I would feel so bad about, but I also was so defensive that I'd never even really apologize for it. It was everyone else's fault, not mine. Like, how dare you, right? But I would have these huge reactions. And on the surface, I would think, oh, okay, maybe it's just because that's the way I was raised. That's the way other reactions were. Or maybe it's just have anger issues, right? I would just like skim the surface. And when you're skimming the surface, so often you're self assigning blame, you're amplifying shame and blame. It's not actually changing the behavior. It's in so many ways making it worse because you're not daring to feel it, go through it, use the funk method to understand it, right? So it's not that I wanted to be cruel, especially to the people I absolutely loved most. The closer you were to me, the meaner I could be. I don't know if any of you have ever been that way or feel that way. You can totally drop it in the chat if you are, or add a comment because I should I know there's a lot of people out there, but it's just it depends on your attachment style if you're going to be loud and angry and, having that more fearful, anxious energy versus the dismissive, that folding into yourself, that minimizing, you know? But for me, it wasn't because I was trying to be cruel. It was because I didn't know how to say, "Hey, I feel invisible here," or "I have a need for being seen and heard and known," which to me looks like, and then expressing what that looks like. I didn't know how to say, "I feel scared you don't see me or care to know me." And even if somebody had just given me a worksheet, like in a therapy session that's like, "Hey, word it in this way," I would have been like, "Mhm, sure, yeah." How though? How? So it's not as simple as just saying the words, it's connecting to those words, it's having power in those words. And the only way to get there is through practice. And practice the way you say it to yourself is the way that you end up saying it out loud. You end up having secure, compassion interactions with others because you've started from within. One of the most important things that my therapist ever said to me is that, Kaz, the reason that you jump into an argument is because you're in the middle of one in your head all the time. And that is so true. So I tried to make other people feel what I was feeling because I didn't have the words to say, "Hey, this is how I feel." I didn't have the security to feel that way, and therefore I would react. What I was reacting to was not what other people were doing. It wasn't what other people were saying. Yeah, I had a need to be seen and heard and known and connected with, but my reaction was actually to the way I was feeling. I didn't want to feel that way. And the only thing I knew how to do, rather than slow down and say, "Oh my gosh, I feel this way," I only knew how to bring people down to my level. And for me, that comes from fearful, avoidant, disorganized energy. That comes from complex PTSD and trauma. And a lot of us have that in our own way. Yours might not be as combative sounding as mine was, but we all, those of us that have repeating limitations, that have trauma, that have neglect. This is the way that it is until we learn to use our voice, to have that voice to express the feeling and the need. That comes with practice, that comes with repetition. So I wasn't fully aware at first that what I was trying to do was make other people feel as bad as I was feeling in order to prove something, in order to express, like, "This is how I'm feeling. Can you feel it too?" Which never works, by the way, never works. But that's where a lot of arguments are going. Depending how you argue, it can be different ways. That's honestly at the core of it is that belief that I can show you by making you. I can make you understand. But there's no making here. Nobody can make anyone do anything. But that, when you hear somebody just say that and then leave it there, you go, "Okay, yeah, but how? How do I do it differently? How do we get through this? How do we start communicating in these different ways?" So I was only aware that I was doing something I didn't want to do. And the only way I knew to be apologetic in the aftermath was to blame myself for everything all the time and let go of boundaries. I used to let go of boundaries and give them away as gifts. Like, "Hey, I'll take down all my boundaries because I'm sorry." How many of you do that? Like, or maybe you're just realizing that you do that. That's not the way it should be, except if that is your experience, if that is how you learned to survive, if that is the story you've had with caretakers, parents, traumatic situations in order to stay safe, that becomes what happens even in the moments with those that you love. So if you can identify it with that, absolutely throw that in the comments as well. Give your Giving your time and space to someone because they need it more is another way of saying that. Holding in what you have to say because you want someone to feel loved and you don't know how to express that in a difficult moment. See, even that, like being a parent, for example, and you're just holding in what it is you want to say, what it is you want to, like, give advice on, because you just want someone to feel loved, and you don't know how to express that in a moment of difficulty because someone else that you love is sharing something deeply emotional. So not all of it has to come across as, like, a deeply big blow up or something that's really, really traumatic. It can be just the simple moments in which somebody begins to cry and you go, "Oh my goodness, I don't know what to say." For those listening, drop into the chat or comment on what this reminds you of in your own life, what this brings up for you, and take that to your BMO practice. Take that to your journal. I want you to take this as good news, though, and I'm going to send you all the love in the world when I say this. This is a learned behavior, and learned behaviors can change. When someone doesn't know how to share what they feel, the reactions can look very different depending on that person. Some people escalate, get louder, become sarcastic or cutting, argue harder, like I used to, but that wasn't always my MO. It depended on the person and the situation. I think that one thing that a lot of us come across is joking and sarcasm are probably one of the most hidden and common ways of coping language. When you don't know how to ask for what you need or express what it is you're experiencing, the jokes can come flying out. And I think we all know at least one person like that. But in the end, those jokes are no longer funny and they don't solve for anything, right? Other people react by shutting down, withdrawing, getting quiet, disappearing emotionally. These are often the peacekeepers and the people pleasers, the ones that say, I can just do this on my own. I don't need you. But the problem here is when you're constantly repeating to yourself, I don't need you, the friendships you have and the partner you have eventually stop feeling needed, or you stop caring to have them in your life. I'm almost sure this is not what you want to practice. This is not what you want to repeat in your relationships, especially with the ones close to you that you want to keep. Some people over explain. They justify, they intellectualize, they talk in circles, they tell you what they've learned, they tell you what they know, they overshare things. This is trying to explain away need for validation because, in truth, this person doesn't necessarily need you to be the one to validate them. They need a past validator and a validator from within. So let me explain that a little bit. When somebody is over explaining, when somebody is just going in circles, they're repeating themselves or they're oversharing because they don't have the words for feeling or need, that's really coming from an old storyline for a need for validation, support, and help. So they don't actually necessarily need you or whoever they're in conversation with to validate them. They need somebody and something from the past. And the only way to come to terms with what is back there is to do it from within. Because the limitation there is that they're actually not validating themselves. People who do this often make a lot of friends, but don't keep them for very long. They move around a lot, things like that. And it just eventually it doesn't serve them anymore. In all of these cases, it eventually doesn't serve you anymore. You get to a point in life where you're just like, hey, I want to keep my friendships. I want to keep my relationships. I want to keep my job. I want to keep my marriage, right? And so you sit there and you go, how can I do this differently? And those can be really desperate times when we sit with, how can I do this differently? That's exactly what I created BMO to answer. So others who are people pleasers end up minimizing themselves, saying it's fine when it really isn't. This is the ultimate parent, partner, coworker reaction. The I'll just do it. How many of us are just like, "Oh, whatever, I'll just do it." Like, we're not gonna engage in teamwork, we're just gonna do it ourselves, we're not gonna depend on anybody. This comes from a variety of places, but at the core, all of these things have the same common downfall. the perceived inability to express what it is that is being experienced or felt, and the inability or lack of space in expressing the need at hand. To feel squashed by the situation, you feel a little hyper, like you need to quickly get out of it, and therefore reaction. Interaction is a willingness to slow down, but it's the slowness from within. It's the practice. The way we were raised is what reinforces these behaviors. It's what reinforces these reactions. It's what worked for us in the past. It's the examples we've seen, is all of that kind of stuff. But we can change that. The teachers that we've had, the caretakers that are a part of our lives, and then the businesses that we get into, the business world that we take part of, the managers and the leaders that we see as authority figures and think to ourselves, oh my gosh, to get there, you absolutely have to have secure behavior. And, we have all these belief systems, these sayings around authority and, who and how they are and what they know and what they hold over us. And then that just reinforces, that just doubles down on the fact that we're listening to things that are still reinforcing limiting beliefs rather than giving us solid examples of secure behavior. Very, very few people in high places actually have secure behavior, and yet we follow them, right? That comes all the way back to we follow our parents. We believe they're absolutely right in all things. That will manifest in a new job. That will manifest with a boss. And then you'll have that argument when you get into a relationship with someone, when you have a best friend or a significant other. So this is why we start emulating poor family dynamics in these situations, such as with bosses and teams at work, right? This is why we also start emulating poor family dynamics when we start to build our own. And then we fold into ourselves and we have all this shame and blame because we're doing this to someone we love, someone we want to be with, to children we want to raise, to have all of the love in the world. And what are we doing? Why is this coming from us, right? We have all these feelings about it. So expressing feelings in a roundabout way is not a personality flaw. These are learning, these are behaviors, these come from coping strategies. They're what I define as reactions, as in redoing, replaying, repeating. These are limitations held up by limiting beliefs. They don't serve you in the long run, even if they work once upon a time, or the perception of them is still working, as in you still perceive them to be working, but you don't want to actually do it that way anymore. So these are the things that we reach for when we don't have language for feelings, for bravery and compassion, or understanding of need. But guess what? Those first three things are the beginning, the core elements of the funk method inside of your BMO journal, as language for feelings, bravery and compassion, understanding of need. They're the part of funk that spells fun. Because let's be honest, if you don't get to the end part, then you're just in an FU moment. And I like to explain this to people because it's very, very intentional when I created the funk method. When you're stuck in the F and the U moment and you don't go anywhere else, this is the argument. This is the way that you're speaking with others when you say, I am blank a feeling. I am mad, for example. And then you go straight into the you, and you are. How many people do those you statements? How many people jump straight into the FU of it all? Like, I am mad and you're annoying right now. F and you. Feelings and a you statement. That's just FU energy, and it's all wrong. It's the nuances of how we speak to ourselves that matter. And that's why the BMO practice is very particular about the order and the wholeness. Every step in order, paying attention to how you say and choosing what speaks to you using the emotional and needs discovery tools. So what I mean by that is that when you're going through the 3 steps of the BMO practice, when you're using that to practice your own inner voice, when you're developing that voice with this practice, with everything that you're doing, you're moving through flow or the problem statement, You're understanding how it is you feel, you're showing feeling, you show up with your self-compassion, you, name your core need, you make a plan, you reveal empowered choices, and then you ground yourself in what it is that you know. The things that are more than affirmations, the things that are more than beliefs, right? So you end up in a much, much better place and back in the present because sometimes we're working on some really old and past things when we're moving through that. And then you reground even more in the present with your purposeful positives. Those are the steps. That is what you move through. So every FU moment, every feeling you, every I am mad, you are annoying can become a fun opportunity. Those moments in which you start spinning up an argument and spiraling with other people can actually be something that is lighter and more fun simply because you're practicing voicing feelings and needs. You're using that every time you write through that practice. So, this is the difference between breaking down and breaking through in your relationships. Sometimes this is the difference between breaking up and breaking through in your relationships. So, emotional is not the same as emotionally aware. And this took me some time to really understand because so many people would give me the compliment of you have like so much awareness. You know so much about yourself. And that wasn't a lie. That was really true. I was a highly emotional person. And I was highly aware of a lot of things, a lot of sensations, a lot of aspects of my life, what it meant. But I would not say, now that I know, now that I've gone through so much of my healing journey, I would not necessarily say that I was emotionally aware. And this is something that matters a lot. Being an emotional person does not mean you're emotionally aware. You can feel deeply and still not know what you are actually feeling. The nuance of it, the more finite word, why you are feeling it, what it is that you need, what information that it is carrying, how not to react to it, how not to make the emotion the trigger, the thing that you're trying to change, and how to say it without harming the connection, how to name that, say out loud, I feel. So being someone that was very, very emotional, I probably could have you know, pointed to a poster and named a face, kinda like if you're in the hospital and they're like, "Name your pain scale between 1 and 10." Like, I was really good at just, like, naming that emotion, but I wasn't really good at expressing the emotion because that needs a little bit more than just, like, the "I am" statement. I think the difference between emotional and emotionally aware is in that nuanced way of how we say it. And that's something that's part of like your BMO practice is very particular to never ever say I am a feeling because we are not our feelings. And when we say I am a feeling, what we're trying to do is change the feeling, which between the lines, we're saying to ourselves, we have to change ourselves because we are the problem because we feel this way. So to say, I am mad, I am upset, I am so annoyed right now is to say, I want to get rid of this feeling. The feeling is me. So I need to figure out how to change or get rid of something in myself. It seems like no big deal to say that, but it makes a huge difference when you start to practice the difference between I am upset and I feel. I feel hurt and I have a need for reassurance that looks like patience, listening, and help. So think about an argument. Think about something that you've been through lately, whether it's with yourself, between you and yourself, or with somebody that you love. Think about what the reaction would be from yourself and from that other person if you went into it and all you had to say is, I am so mad right now, versus I feel hurt and I have a need for reassurance that looks like patience, listening, and help. Can you help me with that? One is so much more secure, and it does absolutely feel impossible when you're not used to speaking that way, and it feels like you're never ever going to be able to speak that way, but I promise you, it comes with practice, and it comes without trying. It comes so naturally that all of a sudden you find yourself talking to strangers and people you absolutely love in this way. I promise you, because I come from a background in which I lived with the crutch of believing I was shy, believing that I was held back by being an introvert, believing that I couldn't say and didn't want to say. And now I'm sharing these things all over the place with all kinds of people, and it comes with ease. And that is exactly what secure behavior is. Secure behavior comes from the voice and practicing that voice. So, in one instance, a conversation explodes. In the other instance, a conversation connects. So this used to be my default reaction pattern. Now it's something I might do once or twice a year. I might have that blow up. I might make that mistake, but only once or twice a year. Whereas it used to be just the way I talked to anything that came across as advice or feedback or criticism. But now I can see it. Now I can pause. I can say, that's not how I wanted to react. I'm sorry. I can apologize without collapsing and without shame or blame, and I can restart. My significant other and I, we practice this together. I mean, he also very much uses the BEMA practice in his own way with his own practice, but we've gotten to the point that when we have old behaviors, when we're in a difficult conversation with ourselves and then someone else enters in and there's a little bit of a lack of patience going on, which isn't always because it's not always bad stress. I mean, you could be in the middle of just thinking through a math problem, right? And if someone comes into that, like, trying to figure something out, it can spiral up. It can become a big reaction. So it's not always the worst thing in the world. It's just the preparing for the surprise, preparing for something to come up. But we now have this habit where we can notice so much faster that we didn't mean to do that. We can notice that it comes from an old wound, an old attachment, and that's no longer who we are, how we want to be. And we literally, almost like a buzzer, I'll walk away or he'll walk away just for a brief second, like almost in a circle, and just walk away, enter another room, and come back and say it. Just look him in the eyes, or he'll do that to me too and say, hey, can I restart? Can I funk this? And we will completely restart and we will move through it. And part of why that works is because we are both familiar with the language of the funk method. He knows where I'm going. He knows this process of what it is I am about to share, and vice versa. And he can trust that process. He can trust that it's not going to be something that he needs to defend or prepare himself for or prepare his response for, and vice versa. He knows the steps I am going through, and he's listening actively. It's open for connection. And it's really kind of amazing because we are polar opposites. And communication for the first 10, 11, 12 years of our relationship was just easier not to have, you know? But that change did not come from learning better scripts. It came from learning to process the words I voice outward in the same way I have been practicing voicing the words I hold inside. So I'm going to say that again. This change came about in my life because I was able to voice words outward because of the practice of voicing them inside. Because I had written to myself, talked to myself, thought with myself, fought with myself, worked through everything, worked through really difficult things, worked through very average things. I had used the practice for everything. So that is what the BMO journal practice is, and specifically what funk does. So why we speak from reactions instead of truth. When we jump straight to speaking without processing, we are usually trying to do one of three things. We are trying to get rid of the emotion, just discharge it, go away. I don't want to feel this way. Or we're trying to protect ourselves, the perception that we are physically or emotionally unsafe. or we're trying to regain control. We're self assigning a situation in order to control it. None of these things is wrong, but none of them create understanding. They're patterns based on old wounds. When we don't feel and understand first, what comes out is rarely what we actually mean. What speaking through funk changes is that funk gives you a pause, a point between feeling and speaking. It helps you name what you're feeling, understand where it's coming from, identify the need that's underneath, choose what you can say or do, and speak from what you know instead of reaction. The whole process is an interaction, and that's an interaction with yourself, even when you're saying it out loud. That is the difference between reacting at someone and communicating with someone. So, if this is sparking some things in you, if it's bringing up some information, if it's bringing up a specific fight you've had once upon a time, or a relationship you used to have, or one you're currently in, I want you to use that as your next BMO prompt. Even if you don't want to write completely through flow, which would be telling the story, you can just start with a problem statement. You can make funk one page. If you think you don't have time for this and you can't go through all of it, just make your flow that one problem statement. Just be like, this is what's on my mind. This old memory is what I'm thinking of right now, and then move through the funk and get to the purposeful positives. If this is bringing something up for you, that is your homework. That is your prompt for your own personal practice. And if you want to learn, if you want to workshop, if you want to see it done out loud, if you want to understand what speaking through funk actually is and how to have these conversations, how to move through conflict, then I will be hosting on February 15th online at 10:30 a.m. Mountain Time. There will also be a recording of it, but I will be having that event on Sunday the 15th, just in time for Valentine's weekend in case you're working through something with a loved one, and we will speak through that together. We will speak through the funk. We will take examples of things that you want to move through, and we will share together how to move through that. So if you want to continue moving through that funk method, if you want to understand how to speak your feelings, how to express understanding, how to arrive at a core need, how to empower choices between you and someone else, and then arrive in your knowing together, then absolutely come to that workshop. So again, February 15th, you can grab a ticket at bmojournal.com/events. And we will talk all about being in conversation and arriving honestly and safely with the most difficult parts of yourself and with the relationships that you hope to keep. So I know that some of you just barely joined, but we're wrapping up right now, and I hope that you will watch the recording. I will post it here shortly, and you can give all the comments and ask any questions that you have. But thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you for being willing to understand what it is that you do in place of sharing how it is you feel, that understanding and that need. And throughout the month, we'll be doing journaling sessions, writing sessions, and more education sessions every Wednesday, all towards the same thing and building on the same thing. But I highly recommend dropping into that workshop for the full 2-hour experience, sitting in your emotions for the full 90 minutes and writing through it, because that is where the magic happens. And I hope to see you then on the 15th. Bye.